Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Trumais Perikei Halacha Aleph. We're learning today Daf Nun Vav. We left off on Daf Nun Hey Amid Beis, 2 lines before the bottom of the Amid. We are dedicating this class L'Refuah Shalema to Levi Halevi Ben Leah, and the halacha that we learned in the Mishnah, the base of the Mishnah, which is that Ha'oichel Truma Shoigeg, then the penalty is to pay keren v'choimish with all of the details that we learned in the Mishnah, actually not only teaching us that you can pay keren to the owner and choimish to someone else. I think another big foundation of the Mishnah is that the keren itself is not viewed only as a financial restitution, because if that would have been the case, then the kohen from whom I took the truma, b'shoyeg, and ate it, would have the koyach, would have the possibility, would have the right to forgive the debt of the keren, but he does not. We learned that the keren and the choimish has to come from chulin, but both of them biblically are imbued with the kedusha of truma, etc. The Gemara is going to spend a big part of today's daf defining the meaning of shoygig. Now, this is very important. The word shoygig means by accident. The word shoygig means inadvertently. Generally, whenever we speak about a shoygig, whether it's our violation b'shoygig, or, a person, God forbid, was machalal Shabbos b'shoygig, there are 2 areas in which a person can be a shoygig. Number 1, let's speak about the case of truma, that I did not know that this food is truma. Had I known, I wouldn't have eaten it. I just didn't know it's truma. There's another type of shoygig, which is, I knew the food is truma. I did not know the halacha, which is that a non-kohen, myself, cannot eat it. I can add another type of shoygig, that a person might have thought that he is a kohen. They knew it's truma. They knew that a non-kohen is not allowed to eat truma. They didn't know that they're not a kohen. All of these are scenarios where there was a complete shoygig. In other words, the person did something at the time thinking that what he or she was doing is completely permitted, and then they discovered that what they did was prohibited. That is shoygig. The question will be, and I know that this topic is not only related to truma, we will actually bring in other scenarios in today's daf, but let me speak about truma. What happens if someone knew that the food is truma? He knew that a non-kohen is not allowed to eat truma. He knew that he's not a kohen, but he did not know that by eating truma b'shoygig, he's not a shoygig, he's a mezid. He didn't know that someone who eats truma b'shoygig is penalized by not only having to pay back the keren, but also having to pay back the choimish. This is gavaldik. So there is a detail of the penalty which isn't even for his case, which is that he knows that what he's doing is usher. For the record, when you eat truma b'mezid, aside of a person being chayiv misa b'dei shamayim, the person is chayiv malchus in a human court. Obviously, if there was a proper forewarning. So this is a gavaldik question. And I know it's not only for here. As a mashal, this is discussed in Masechta Shabbos, Munbaz Lakish. Yeah, okay.
Didn't he eat this b'mezid?
Yes. Very good. I get this. Exactly. Let me give you the case where this is discussed. In Masechta Shabbos and the Bavli. A person knows that chaylev may not be eaten under the penalty of kares and malchus. Right? The Torah says don't eat chaylev. The person knew that it's chaylev. The person knew you're not allowed to eat chaylev. What this person did not know is that if someone eats chaylev b'shoygeg, the chayiv a carbon. That is a detail that he didn't know. And he did not eat it b'shoygeg. He just didn't know that if someone would have done it b'shoygeg, you're chayiv a carbon. Like over here, person is eating truma b'mezid, but he doesn't know that if someone eats truma b'shoygeg, they're chayiv to pay not only keren is a given, they have to pay a choimish. Is this considered a shoygig or not? That's one top conversation that we're going to have today. We're going to have another Another interesting question regarding shoygig. What happens if a person decided that whenever there's a safek truma, you're allowed to eat it? This person is not he decided. He is going to eat a safek truma, even though you're not allowed to. If he would have known that it's vaday truma, he wouldn't have eaten it. So he's doing a violation, b'mezid, right? He knows that it's safek truma. He decided, I don't care that it's safek truma, I'm going to eat it nevertheless. But had he known that it's vaday truma, he wouldn't have eaten it. Turned out that it was vaday truma. I'll go even better. What happens if a person is violating something? They don't know that they're violating something, but this is a type of person that even if they would have known that it's prohibited, they anyways would have done it. Is that called a shoygig? Right? A person, God forbid, is a machalol Shabbos. The person doesn't know that this action is a chilul Shabbos. They don't know that. But even if someone were to tell them, hey, what you're doing is asur, he would still do it. But he did it b'shoygig. Is that called a shoygig? And more. So there's going to be a big part of today's daf, Pashut, analyzing the boundaries, the limitations of shoygig. Another part of today's daf will be bringing up a machlekes that we have in Yuma Ein Gimel and the Bavli between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, and this is really a shas sugya, which is chatzi shir. Is chatzi shir asur min haTorah, or is chatzi shir muter min haTorah? Penalty, punishment, is only when you have the shir, in whichever sin, right? So a person carries Shabbos, normally you have to carry a minimum amount. If it's food, a gregeres, right? Less than that, you're not going to be chayv chatas b'shoygig. Okay, what happens if a person carried less than that? Chatzi shir. If a person is not allowed to eat chaylev, when do you get punished? When you have a kazayas. If a person eats a half a kazayas, are you chayiv? Rabbi Yochanan says that even though you're not chayiv a penalty, but it's asur min haTorah. Chatzi shir asur min haTorah. Reish Lakish says chatzi shir is muter min haTorah. We're going to see how this is very much connected to our topic. The Yerushalmi, and one part of this Yerushalmi is not the way it goes in the Bavli, will tell us today that even a Shlakish that says Chatzi Shir is muter min haTorah will have three exceptions in which he will also admit that Chatzi Shir is asur min haTorah, and the third, which is the one that's going to be relevant, which will be, is that if a person eats, let's say, a person is planning to eat the kazayas of chaylev. According to Reish Lakish, even when he only ate half, he already violated the biblical violation because he planned lechatchila to eat the whole thing. In other words, where do they argue when a person is only going to be eating a half a kazayas? They only plan to eat a half a kazayas. He only ate a half a kazayas. And then Reish Lakish says, min haTorah, he didn't violate anything. Rabbi Yochanan says, let's go with one of their reasons, chazi le'itztarufe. But if lechatchila he planned to eat the whole kazayas, even though, again, penalty, punishment is only when he hits the kazayas, but the prohibition was violated even when he came to a half a kazayas. This is going to be the bulk of today's daf. At the end of the daf today, we're going to be discussing about someone who's eating truma, b'mezid, but shaloi kedarkoi. And we're going to have two different scenarios. Like a person who drinks truma of vinegar. Vinegar normally is used as a dip, but he drank it. Is it going to be b'mezid if you eat truma? Penalty in human court is malchus. Are you going to be chayv malchus or not? And at the end, if we'll have time, we're going to go to the next part of the Mishnah that speaks the din that the truma, truma b'shoygig chayv keren v'choimish, isn't only if the truma is tar, it's also if the truma is tamei. And the question now will be is if he ate truma tamei b'shoygig and he has to pay keren v'choimish, does he have to pay keren v'choimish from chulin that's tahar, which will then become truma tahira, or can he get away with saying I ate truma tameya? I'm going to designate chulin tameim, which will then be imbued with kedushas truma, and it will become truma tameya. So he's going to give back what he took, but he's not going to have to give back something more than what he took. That will be the final discussion we're going to have today. And now, without any further ado, Chavra Daf Nun Hey Amud Beis. Daf Nun Hey Amud Beis, right by the dot. And again, the brevity of Yerushalmi is something that we have to get used to. We still have to get used to. How the Gemara is coming to the premise that we're coming to is something that we have to get used to. But the Gemara understands from the words that ha'oichel truma shoygig mishalem keren v'choimish, that the definition of our Mishnah of a shoygig is only if there is a complete shoygig. Complete shoygig could mean, like I said, he doesn't know that the food is truma at all, or he knows it's truma, he doesn't know that a non-kohen cannot eat it, complete, or he doesn't know at all, he's not even suspicious, that he is not a kohen. He doesn't know that, he thinks he's a kohen. I'm just giving you examples where it's a complete shoygig. Somehow understood from the Gemara, reading the Mishnah, that if there is only a part shoygig, like the example that I gave in the intro, we're going to learn again, our Mishnah will hold, if it's a part shoygig, it's not included in the penalty of the Mishnah, you're not mishalem keren v'choimish. Says the Gemara, asks the Gemara, that the loy chein omar Rabbo b'shem Rabbi Yechanan, did we not learn by Rabbo in the name of Rabbi Yechanan? And here we have different girsos, and we're going to go with the girsa mezid bechelev shoygig b'karben. When people hear this, I'm almost sure that the comment that Vlad made or someone made, you made when we learned Shabbos, because the brain thinks the same. So again, listen to the case. A person is eating chelev, aviv. You're eating chelev. You know that it's asur. You're eating it b'mezid. But there is a detail that you don't know. What don't you know? You don't know that if someone eats chelev b'shoygeg, the chayiv karben, that he doesn't know. You can say, who cares? You know you're not allowed to eat it, and you're eating it b'mezid. There is a detail of the punishment. There's a detail of the punishment, not even again to your case, to the prohibition that you don't know of. And we was taught in the name of Rabbi Yechanan that even when you are mezid b'chelev, but you have a lack of knowledge of the din, that if someone eats it b'shoygeg, the chayev karben, turning to Daf Nun Vav all the way on the top, you know what happens if someone eats that chelev? Well, again, eat chelev yechayiv kares. Aside of that, like truma, eat truma yechayiv misa b'dei shamayim. Aside of that, in the human court, you get malchus. God says, "Thou shalt not do it." You did it. That's a lav sheyesh by ma'isa. You get malchus, right? So first of all, if masrin boy, if the person was forewarned, don't eat it. It's chelev, and if you're going to eat it, you're going to get malchus. And according to some people, the edim have to quote for him the pasuk. Okay, and he ate it. You know what's going to happen? He's going to get malchus. But you know what? Not only is he going to have to get malchus, not only does he get malchus for the sin of eating chelev v'mezid, he also has to bring a carbon. Why does he have to bring a carbon? Because there was a detail of what he did that was b'shoygig. What exactly was the shoygig? He was unaware that if you eat it b'shoygig, you have carbon. He didn't know that.
Right, this is the weirdest thing I've ever heard.
I can promise you, I'm almost certain that if you're going to go, guys, to Bavli, Shabbos Samaches Samachtes, hear Kevan saying the same words. I'm almost certain. Just for the record, Reish Lakish disagrees with that. This is what's known as the Shita of Munbaz. And here Rabbi Yechanan in the Yerushalmi is siding with Munbaz, not even quoting him. B'shem Rabbi Yechanan. Umevi carbon. Amazing. In other words, since there is an element of shoygeg, he sinned without knowing. Now that he knows, okay, now bring a carbon. So asks
He
the
gets
Gemara.
a double.
Huh?
He gets a double.
Sure, he gets a double. Oh, see, Vlad is happy. See, I like that.
Now, I'm not happy.
Yeah,
I
happy. You're
feel for the
smiling.
guy.
You're thinking you should get triple.
Oh, chas v'sholom. I feel for the guy.
I'm not just kidding. Okay. I'm projecting on you what I'm saying. This guy is a violator. Yes. Malchus and a carbon. So the Emar Afacha, they should have said the same over here. Listen to the case. That if a guy is eating truma b'mezid, he doesn't know that if you eat it b'shoygig, you're chayv keren v'choimish. You know what he thinks? If you eat it b'shoygig, you're chayv keren. No, everyone knows keren, because even though we said that keren is not only financial restitution, it's not only, the coin cannot be moichelet, but the keren is for sure financial restitution. Right? There's no way in the world, shoygig mezid, if I take your property and I use it for me, I gotta pay you back for that. independent, shoygig, mezid. In other words, keren your chayv. He doesn't know your chayv choimish. Now let me tell you something. Choimish and korban are very similar. Listen to what I'm saying. It's doing something b'shoygig. Having to give a korban. What's a korban? A kapara. Having to pay the choimish. What's the choimish? I didn't take the choimish. I only took the keren. It's like a kapara. It's very similar. So wouldn't they say that if mezid betruma v'shoygig bekorban, eating truma b'mezid, aside of the spiritual penalty of misa b'dei shamayim, you're chayv malchus. So yasra by v'yilka l'chura. First of all, if there was asra, the guy should get malchus. And on top of that, beautiful, no keren. But v'yavi choimish. How great is that? Now you can ask a question. That 1 second, what about keren? Remember the rule, guys, that when I do one act that has two penalties, you get the more severe penalty, right? And so first of all, there's a concept of kamlei midirabaminei, and then there's a specific expression in Chazal that you're not loika umishalim, even though there are exceptions to that. So that's a whole different topic we're not going to review right now. But we're just making this comparison. Would that opinion not say over here that even when there's only a shoygig for the choimish, aside of the malchus, the yavi choimish? Okay, and what's the kasha? So the kasha is, now I'll read the Pnei Moshe. Okay, Zol Zayin, look inside the top Pnei Moshe. Masran by Mishum Chelev, umevi gam kein karbin, hoyel v'shagag boy. Because the Sfiralei is Rabbi Yochanan here. Shigegas karbin shma shigaga. V'hachi ma'isel oladayik b'din shoygig betruma. The mekiv and the shoygig b'choimish hu d'chsiv. Emar du'uf hachinami. Okay, that what? The im hazit v'yeda shi truma. Elo shelo yada shechayov and aleo choimish. That yilka mishum hazit betruma v'yavi choimish d'shgaga hi yetzloi. And so, okay, who says not? So va'anan taninan. But we learned in our Mishnah that only ha'oichel truma shoygig ayochayv keren v'choimish. And here we have a case where your oichel truma mezid, you just don't know that the choimish happens if you eat it b'shoygig. From our Mishnah is mashma that in this case you're not going to pay any penalty other than getting the malchus. So this appears to contradict the shita of Munbaz in the Bavli, the shita of Rabbi Yochanan here in the Yerushalmi. So Amar Rab Ze'er, that even though Rabbi Yochanan stands with his shita by Chelef, Munbaz stands with his opinion, even they will admit that Truma is different. And why is it different? That there is a Gzeiras HaKosov, from which we learn that only if there is a total shoygeg, only if it's a total shoygeg, do you get the Keren D'Choimish. Where do you see that? So again, this is the pasuk in Parshas Emor that we quoted yesterday. The ish ki yoichal kodesh bishgaga. The eating of the kodesh has to be bishgaga. Shetehei kol achilasei bishgaga. So the moment this person knows that what he's eating is truma and he's not a kohen and he's not allowed to eat it, he's no longer going to be chayiv choimish. So the Mishnah gezagut only ha'oichel truma shoygeg ayor chayiv keren v'choimish. So this is an exception. Now we have the base for the rest of the discussion of a shoygig. Now you get the hemshech. So the Gemara basically established that there is a special pasuk that we don't even learn further. We don't say that this is a source and be makish the whole Torah to truma. For whatever reason, we don't say that. We say, there's something special about the shoygig by truma that it has to be kol achilas shoygig. So now let's find other scenarios where perhaps it's not a complete shoygig. As an example. All right, let's go. B'mezid, b'sfeikoi. You have to get the words over here. B'shoygig, b'vadoi. Someone has in front of him food. The emes is, the food is vadai truma. They don't know that. There are shoygig in the vadai. They don't know it's vadai truma. What do they think it is? So normally, what's the shoygig kevan? You think it's chulin. Here, they think it's a safek truma. They know you're not allowed to eat safek truma, al pi halacha, but this person for himself decided, for that I'm lowering my standard. I will allow myself to eat safek truma. So he's being amazed for what he thinks it is, but he's being a shoygig for what it really is. without the first Rabbi Zajac pasuk, without the first conversation, especially if you subscribe to Munbaz, to Rabbi Yechanan, you would say, Avada, this is a shoygig. If only being a shoygig in the Karban or in the Chaimish is called the guy, he didn't know he's eating Truma, that's Truma Vada. He didn't know that. But now that you told me, no, that it has to be a complete shoygig, he's not so innocent. He knew he's sinning. He thought that he's sinning by eating safek. What was the sin? He ate vadai. Let's read it. So what will be the halach? Even according to Rabbi Zajac pasuk. Now, what about another case that the Gemara did not ask? Aviv, what would happen if you have a person who, God forbid, he allows himself to eat vadai truma? He's a sinner. He'll eat vadai truma. He had in front of him food. He thought it was safek truma. He for sure eats safek truma, and he ate it. But he didn't know that it's vadai truma. He didn't know that it's vadai truma. Is that a kasha, whether that's called a shoygeg or not? The Gemara didn't ask that. Either way, he would have eaten it. No, it's the Gemara only gave a case where there's a question. Again, the words are b'mezid b'sfeikoi, b'shoygeg b'vadoi. You got to love these words. From this, the Gemara doesn't answer the shaila of what will be the din. The Gemara does not answer that kasha. But from this, we extrapolate then that one thing is for sure. Shoygeg has to mean that if the person would have had more information, he would not have done what he did. If a person would even eat truma vadai, he thinks it's safek. But if someone would have told him the emes, he would have done it anyways. That is never called a shoygeg. That's the next line.
All right, but that's
I want to read it inside. This is so important. Amar Rabbi Yosi, Hada Amra. Here, from here, you see that only hashav loy mi'idiyasi. Only if someone would hashav means that he would do tshuva. He refrain. He would not do what he's doing if he would have known. Let me give you an example of munbas. Let me give you a potential example, Kevin. A person was eating chaylev. Had they known that eating chaylev is such a horrible thing, that even if you eat it b'shoygeg, you're chayev a karbin, maybe this guy wouldn't have eaten it b'mezid. I think you were trying to ask that. Right. In other words, you can say perhaps, but if you know for sure that this guy would sin no matter what, even though he didn't know that he's sinning, then chayev al shkogosei. Chayev means
I was just going to say you can't predict the future.
Only when you would have, only if you would have refrained, are you chayiv the shoygeg, whatever that shoygeg is, chayiv karben, chayiv chaimish. If you would not be shav mi'idiyasai, then it's not called a shoygeg. It's going to be called a mezid.
All right, how do we know?
I just want to word it out over here because it took me a while yesterday. Rabbi Yosi is not answering the question. The question actually remains unanswered. He just says that from the shaila of the Gemara, one thing I do know clear, the definition, this is so important. And that's even by oinus. I know there's a big discussion amongst the achreinim. I know here we're speaking about shoygeg. Someone was coerced to do something, but they would have done it even if they wouldn't have been coerced. Is that called an oinus? It's very similar. Guy did something b'shoygeg, but he would have done it anyways. By shoygeg, the Gemara is saying that's not a shoygeg. Now, over here, it's different. Why is it different over here? He's a person, he's a sinner. What's the sinner? He allows himself to eat safek truma. He does not eat vadai truma. What was in front of him was vadai truma. He thought that it's some sort of halachic case where it's safek. He ate it b'mezid. Here, perhaps it's called a shoygeg, because had he known the emes, he wouldn't have done it. Now, what will be the what will be the halacha? Now, what is the halacha if someone eats safek truma? I'm not certain. I don't think the chayiv malchus. But even if there would be chayiv malchus, then we would say chayiv malchus and chayiv chaimish. If there's no chayiv malchus, then the din would be chayiv keren v'chaimish. The only reason why in the havamina of the Gemara you would be you would get Malkus and Chaimish, because there's never Malkus and Keren. But we want to know about the Chaimish. And that's something that remains unanswered. And now we're going to learn in the Gemara. Okay, now, Kevin, what did you want to say? I interrupted you already 8 times today.
No, I interrupted you. I apologize. I was just going to say, how do we know how is he going to react each time? Every time, as you always say, every case is a case, and every time he may change his mind.
There has to be a precedent. That's very good. There has to be a precedent. How does someone become known when he does a sin b'faresia? I would say this as a rule. Because if a person sins in private, you can argue that he's not a sinner. At this moment, the Yetzer Hara got the better of him.
Exactly.
Very good. But I'm saying if someone sins berabim means in front of 10 other Jews, or according to some opinions, in front of his Rebbe. It doesn't have to be a Admur. It can be in front of the person whom he respects. It means it's already a person that became so habituated that's who I am. I don't, God forbid, I eat chaylev, I eat truma safek. Then we halachically assume, even though every Jew will do tshuva, we're not going to say he did tshuva already, unless he proves it. Okay.
Thank you.
Next case, this is so beautiful, about Shoigeg. Omar, now listen to this. Ani poirish mikazayis. Guys, this shaila is according to Shitas Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan is the one that holds that a chatzi shir, for which you never chayv a penalty, nevertheless, is something that you may not do biblically. Chatzi shir asur min hatoyra. So if a person says, I never eat a full kazayis, and let's go to the case of truma. But even when I know that something is truma, and I know that chatzi shir is asur min hatoyra, but I eat chatzi shir. Ve'eni poirish mechatzi kazayis. So where's the shoygek here? Aviv. You have to add this. You have to chap. So what happened was, what was in front of him was really a kazayis. He didn't know it's a kazayis. Hashav mi yidiyasei. Had he known that what's in front of him is halachically already defined as a kazayis, he wouldn't have eaten it. But he ate it, not because he didn't know it's truma. He ate it b'mezid. He knew it's truma, but zakter, I don't know. I don't care to violate a half a kazayis. So what's the question? Is your act considered an act of shoygeg? And then what? Chayiv choimish? Or is your act considered an act of mezid? Now, would you get malchus? I don't think so. Because when you were forewarned, you have to tell a person, if you eat this, he thought he's eating a half a kazayis. So he'll have to pay the keren. If there's no malchus, he pays the keren, but he won't have to pay the chaimish. Are you chayiv chaimish? Is it called shoygeg? This is great. You got the question? He was mazed, but had he known it's a full kazayis, he wouldn't have eaten it. But b'mezid, he eats a half a kazayis. So for this, the Gemara has an answer. For the previous case, we had no answer, the way we're learning the Gemara. So for this, Amar Rabbi Bun Bar Chia, Nase ka'oichel chatzi zayis b'shoygeg v'chatzi zayis b'mezid. Wowee. The second half that he ate, guys, was b'shoygeg. Is that true? Why is that? Because he thought he's only eating a half a zayis. The first half of Zayis was an act of mezid. He knew and he ate it. So he says he did 2 violations. We view it as if he did 2 different acts of eating. A half of Zayis was b'mezid. The other half is b'shoygeg. And therefore what? I want to tell you, not and therefore pay a chaimish on the second half. There's another thing, that when are you chayiv to pay chaimish? What's the pasuk that we quoted before? Person who is oichel kodesh bishgaga. All penalties in the Torah are defined oichel kazayis. He'll be completely exempt. He won't pay the chaimish because he didn't end up eating a kazayis, so he wasn't oichel. But how we look at what he did was, he did 2 different violations. He ate a half a kazayis b'mezid, and he ate a half a kazayis b'shoygeg. That's what Rabbi Bun Bar Chia says. How great is that? Says the Gemara, how can you say that we view what he did. He did one Maisa Achila. He ate a Kazayas. But halachically, we say he ate half and half. Oy bazoi. Ve'in yizbo Rabbi Bun bar Chia Rab Shimon ben Lakish. If he would now follow, if he would have followed, if we were to follow the Shita of Reish Lakish, that says that what? That Chatzi Shir is mutin min ha-Torah. Ochal Chatzi Zayis behelam echad potter. According to that Shita, what's the question? Daf Nun Vav Amid Beis. What were to happen? V'hachem ochal shnei chatzoye zeisen v'chasar kol shehu potter. So the kasha, the Gemara is asking that according to Reish Lakish, if a person is eating a kezayis of truma, what would be the din? Why don't we say he'll never be chayiv, even when he eats the whole kezayis? Why not? Because a kezayis is made out of two kezayisim. The first half of kezayis, or the words of the Gemara is, chatzi shir doesn't mean half. It means less than the shir. Eating less than the shir, is something that you are completely exempt from. What makes you chayiv? The bit that brings you over the line of a kezayis. So let's go to, according to the logic, Reish Lakish, you'll never be chayiv keren v'chaimish. Means in the case of a full shoygag, a guy has food in front of him, doesn't even know that there's a problem. He eats a kazayas or more. He should be exempt. Why should he be exempt? Because we should view, why don't we separate it? The first half, you are completely exempt. The other half is not a shear. How can you say that a person makes a ma'isa achila l'Rabbi Yechanan, but we view it as two halves? Half b'mezid, half b'shoygeg. L'Reish Lakish, biblically, if the person would have been told, again, what's the definition of a shoygeg? If you would have known that what you're doing is prohibited, you wouldn't have done it. Okay, a guy's eating a kazayis of he doesn't know. If he would have been notified, he would have eaten half. That's the way to word it. He would have eaten half. He would not be shav mi'idiyasei. L'Reish Lakish, biblically, because you are allowed to eat a part of the shear. So what would the knowledge have stopped them from eating? The second half. The end, the one that brings you to a kazayas. So why don't we always let Reish Lakish separate one from the other?
My question, Rabbi.
Yes.
You said you're allowed to eat half of it, or you're allowed to get away with it. You're not allowed.
According to Reish Lakish, I'm going to say the word you are allowed.
That's with all?
Biblically, not rabbinically. Doesn't matter.
But isn't that at some point rabbinically become biblically?
No.
It's practiced by everyone?
We don't paskin like Reish Lakish. B'chlal, the rule is that Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yechanan, halacha like Rabbi Yechanan, only in 3 areas do we paskin like Reish Lakish. This is not one of the 3. This is a great kasha. It's a very lamdusha Gemara today. And the Gemara tells us something over here. This is something important that the Bavli disagrees with. The Gemara is basically, I'm going to go to just to get to the ending. The Gemara says that when a person has in mind to eat a full kezayis, even l'Reish Lakish, half of it is asur min ha-Torah. And that takes away the kash. Because if he would have known that it's truma, he would have been hashav mi'idiyasa. He wouldn't have eaten any of it. This, what I just said, is only the Yerushalmi. Well, let me say these words. In Yuma, right, where we have Rabbi Yechanan and Reish Lakish and the Bavli. So why does Rabbi Yechanan say Chatzi Shir Aseh min ha-Torah? There's really 2 reasons, but let's go with the one, that because Chazi le'itztarufei. So Chazi le'itztarufei means, right, how can you say, Aviv, that if I am going to be penalized for having one, if having half of one is nothing, nothing plus nothing equals nothing. That's what Rabbi Yechanan basically says. How can you say that the problem is with the shear? If less than a shear is not a problem, then how does it become a problem? It must be that less than a shear is a little problem, and a little problem becomes a big problem. That works. Chazi le'itztarufi. The Gemara is basically going to say over here that Reish Lakish agrees to the Chazi le'itztarufi. But when do we say chazi leitztarufe? When you plan to have the whole thing, then it works. Since I plan to have the whole kazayis, then every little bit prior to the kazayis is a prohibition. That answers the chazi leitztarufe. Rabbi Shlokish says, but if I'm only planning to have half, then we don't say chazi leitztarufe because I don't plan to do a ma'aseh achila. It gives Reish Lakish a lot more to tell Rabbi Yechanan, I understand chazi leitztarufe. I even agree to it, but only when you are actually going to be eating two halves. Happens to be that Reish Lakish agrees with Rabbi Yechanan, not only when you plan to eat the whole kazayis, there are two other cases. There are three areas in which Reish Lakish agrees to Rabbi Yechanan. So this is our Yerushalmi, and it's quoted a lot in the sugi of Chatzi Shir. This Yerushalmi in our pagination, Daf Nun Vavam and Beis Trumais is quoted. Answers the Gemara, Moed Reb Shimon ben Lakish. Number one, in any case of Isur Hana, when God says, not thou shalt not eat, when God says you may not have benefit, whenever the Isur is of benefit, then even less than a kazayis is a biblical violation. And I'll tell you why. Because Hana you get from a most minute amount. You know, achila is, God says don't eat. The definition of eating, not nibbling, not whatever other word in English, eating means a kazayis. Pleasure is pleasure. Yeah, there's more pleasure, there's less pleasure, but you get pleasure even from a less than a kazayis. So first of all, chatzi shir is not shayich really by hana. Whatever the isur is hana. Number two, and this is extremely important. On Yom Kippur, God does not say don't eat. Doesn't say that. What God says is that b'yom HaKippurim ta'anu es nafshei seichem. Afflict your souls. And really we know that there are 5 inuyim, but even if we're going to make the inuy of refraining from eating and drinking as separate, which many people do, still it doesn't say don't eat. It says don't afflict yourself. And by the way, the shear on Yom Kippur, as we know, is not a kazayis. It's a koisevas hagasa. Remember that. It's a large date. Because how much food does one need to eat to no longer feel afflicted when you have a large date, which is more than a kazayis? On the other hand, even eating less than the koisevas hagasa removes a little bit of the inlay nefesh. And therefore, even a shlakish is moided that on Yom Kippur, it's biblically prohibited to eat half a shear. Look inside the Rashirilio on the right side, around 8 lines from the top. B'yom HaKippurim, the Rachmana Omar ta'anu es nafshei seichem, and even having a half a shear in Yom Kippur means less than the Kesevas Hagasa, the Ein Kan Inui. Umikan hamakim, that even though mitzad echad, we all know, many people are familiar with the shiurim on Yom Kippur. Yes, if someone cannot fast, then on Yom Kippur, and according to sometimes on Tisha B'Av, that's a whole machlokes, but let's go on Yom Kippur, you have the idea of shiurim, have less than the shear, and therefore you're not going to be violating biblically. That's not really accurate, because here we're having a concept that when you are allowed to break your fast, then at least break your fast less than the shear. But if you're not allowed to break your fast, to give us a carte blanche, biblically I didn't do anything, that's not true. Fakert. Ta'anus nafsei sheichem has the chumrah, as we're learning here in the Yerushalmi, that there's no concept of a half a shear. You have a little bit of food of Yom Kippur, you diminished a little bit the inui nefesh. And number 3, which will answer our sugya, that if your kavana lechatchila is to eat the whole shear, even a shlakish is moida that half of the shear is asur min ha'toira. And therefore, the Gemara's kasha is no longer a kasha, because according to Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, if someone who did not know that what's in front of him is truma, and he plans to eat a kazayas, if you were to tell him this is truma, he wouldn't have eaten even a half a shear. So Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, you're chayiv chaimish. It's only in the case lishitas Rabbi Yechanan, where someone is amazed. That means that they know that it's truma. And this is a person who violates knowing that it's truma because it's a half a shear. They're amazed. But there was a shoygeg in the shear, All of this is based on the first thing we learned today, that by Truma mitzad echad, Chazal were medayik that has to be a complete shoygig. The Gemara is saying, actually, that it's not a complete shoygig. It's not a complete shoygig. It's mezid and shoygig. Mezid and shoygig would mean not that you pay choimish for the half of a kezayis. No, that you don't pay a choimish. You chayiv choimish when you ate a kezayis b'shoygig. You didn't eat a kezayis b'shoygig. So let Rabbi Yechanan, you can divide half and half. Let Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, you can't always divide half and half, because no one would eat any of it if they would know that it's prohibited, because a half a shear is asur min ha-Torah for the person who's planning to eat the whole shear. This is a big statement.
Oh, if you're planning ahead, everything is bemazed. If you're bemazed planning to eat, and there's a shogeg involved in half of it.
No, I'm not. So again, let's go back to the case of the Gemara. The whole thing, you see, you're back to this. Okay, a person, Reuven, God forbid, is saying, even though we paskin like Rabbi Yechanan, chatzi shir asur min ha-Torah, Reuven is not a kohen. He thinks there's a half a kezayis of truma. Reuven is saying, I am eating it. Adam tell him you're not allowed to eat it. I'm eating. And he says, why? I'm eating because I know you're not allowed to eat it. I will never eat a kezayis, because that's already punishable. But if it's not punishable, even though it's asur min ha-Torah, I'm going to eat it. That's what this guy says. And he eats it. Then someone tells him, you genius, what you ate was a kezayis. See, it's special. Says Rabbi Yechanan, there are two things. There is the shoygeg for the kezayis, emes, but there is no shoygeg for all of the kezayis. There is a mezid for half of the kezayis. Since there wasn't a shoygeg for the entire kezayis, you're not going to be chayiv any choimish. Again, fitting to what we learned today, shoygeg means complete shoygeg. Even according to Munbaz, not by Truma. By Truma, complete shoygeg. And now let's conclude today. We have a few minutes. Now we're moving on. Rav Shlokish would say that you're chayiv in that case. Gavaldik. One second. Rav Shlokish would say, no. 1 second. Rav Shlokish would say, I think it would be the same halacha. First of all, had he known, he wouldn't have eaten it. But he ate it. This concept that what you ate was amazing. But the shoygeg is on half. Since the shoygeg is on half of a kezayis, how can you be penalized for a choimish when choimish is only when you ate a kezayis b'shoygeg? Okay, now we're moving on to someone who ate something b'mezid, but they ate it shaloi kedarkoi. So as an example, there's two examples here. If a person drank hamigameya, migameya means to sip, but the point is that vinegar is normally used as a dip, and instead of him dipping it, he drank it up slowly. So you might have argued that this is shaloi kedarkoi, you're not going to be chayiv malchus. No, hamigameya choimed shel truma, you are chayiv malchus. And as we're going to find throughout, I'm just reading inside over here in the Marafulda, if it's miyashev es hanefesh, interestingly using the same words we just had by Yom Kippur, since it is miyashev your nefesh, whether that means it gave you nourishment, in other words, it wasn't damaging to you. Therefore, you're chayiv. Another similar law, the word koises literally means chewing, nibbling. It means someone took raw wheat kernels, not toasted wheat kernels, which was commonly eaten, right? But it was not even roasted. It was mamish raw. Most people do not eat it that way. But he ate it that way. In other words, your stomach is filled. Even though that's not kedarkoi, you're going to be chayiv malkes. Zok the Gemara, 1 second. Actually, these two statements are subject to a machlekes tanoim. Tani, we learned in a braisa. Ha migameya choimet shel truma. Guys, you add the word shoygeg here. That must be the case. Actually, we're going to see that Tanakama holds. You're always mishalom keren, guys. You're always mishalom keren because I took your property. That makes no difference if I ate it kedarkoi, shaloi kedarkoi, if I was mazik myself, if it was meyashev by nefesh. If I took your stuff, I got to compensate. So there's no discussion about the keren. The question will be about the choimish. Mishalom es ha-keren ve'enu mishalom es ha-choimish. Obviously, this Tana holds that the Torah says the oichel kodesh bishgaga. Oichel, you're not oichel. Same thing. It's only Rebbe that says, Ani oimer, shemishalom keren v'choimish. In other words, Rabbi Yechanan rules like Rebbe. When the Rambam paskins like Rebbe, over there in the Rambam, so the Lechem Mishnah asks, Rebbe v'chavei Rav. We don't paskin like Rebbe. So he says, no, whenever we find that Rabbi Yechanan, which is an Amoira, but if Rabbi Yechanan sides with Rebbe, then we paskin like Rebbe. That's the source from here. Next case, Rabbi Yirmeh b'shem Ravimi, moedim chacham leRebbe. Even though the Chachamim say that Hamigamei Chomin Shel Truma is not an act of eating, but if B'Megamei Chomin Shel Truma Achar Tibuloi, if someone first dipped their food into vinegar, so you dipped it, and then there's some vinegar left in the bottom of the thing. Vlad is thinking about pickle juice with l'chaim for sure. I'll make a bet. So you're having the pickle juice, and then at the end there's a bissel pickle juice left, and then you drink it. That's the way you eat it. Then shu mishalom keren v'choimish, because then sha'choimish is miyashev es hanefesh. I would have wanted to go on. Okay, it's say we'll stop here.
The concept of shalodako. Do we apply that to Yom Kippur?
Do we apply that to Yom Kippur? What we will apply to Yom Kippur, Kevin, very good, is that anything that you bring into your body that's not miyashev your nefesh, you're not breaking the affliction. I don't know what that would be. Could be that would be eating something that's poisonous. Eating something that's, God forbid, it's a side of the. You didn't do what you did not break your inoi, not even.